Good morning, folks. This is Shippy the Explorer. Welcome back to the station. Um, I trust that you have had a good rest and, well, or you're going off to bed. But welcome to another story time. That's, well, I think will be gravitating and interested since you have and we have embarked on the last story of climbing Blue Mountain. Then I think since you seem like you have enjoyed that story, then well, Shippy the Explorer has come back to you with another experience that I had with a good group of friends of mine in a recent time when we climbed the Blue Mountain for a second time. Well, since I have you, if you're a first time person seeing this station and coming on to these stories or these experiences, well, stick around and see if you can watch a tape to the end of it. And if you like it, you can do share to other friends. And then, if you really want to hear more of these stories and join in Shippy the Explorer in the experience that we have been having, you just subscribe. But for my friends, welcome back to this station. Well, since you have enjoyed the last story about climbing the Blue Mountain, that was back in 1975, I think, way back then. That was well, interesting climb. And but so I here to tell you another way of getting to the Blue Mountain. And this is what we planned. It's a recent time. A friend of mine and the family said, let's get together and we go to Blue Mountain. I said I've been up there before, and if you want me to take you up to there, you guys have to start to walk and exercise and make sure that you're fit, because Blue Mountain is not an easy place to go. And I don't think they took my instructions seriously. They maybe they did some walking and flatland walking and all that. No running, no exercise, no stretching, no muscle building, and so the trip was all planned from United States, and here we are. So this, when I tell her this story, then some of the information I don't have in terms of contacts anymore, but this is another way of reaching the Blue Mountains. So I had got the information from a friend of mine that a family in Kingston, they owned a place called Whitfield Hall up in the Portland, almost in the Blue Mountain Peak. And this is a camp or a cabin that they can sleep maybe up to 20 people. And we have gotten that information from my friend. And so we contacted the person and made arrangement to say we are going to come to Blue Mountain. Now, the Whitfield Hall organization, what they do is they meet you at a certain point, drive you up, and then you camp out. You have coffee and dinner and all sort of things, and up in the mountain, and then and then early in the morning, then you take off to the Blue Mountain Peak. But here is the story that this is the path we took. We took off from United States in the jet plane, and we in various planes, and we gathered in Kingston, Norman Manley Airport in outside Kingston, in the outside. We call it Palisadoes in the old days. And we gathered and we drove to a place up in Cherry Gardens, where this house we just stayed, got dinner, and we were able to eat and bathe and relax And some of us slept in cots in this place up in Cherry Gardens. That information I have. And so we planned to meet the Whitfield Hall people the next day. So we drove into our car. On the way, we had rented a van. I think it was a 6-cylinder. We wanted a 6-cylinder van. And this is one of the things you're going to Jamaica. When you want a special vehicle, make sure when you reach and you rent these vehicles, make sure you have a good vehicle, because the terrain of Jamaica is not that flat. It's Jamaica is hilly and bumpy, and valleys and rivers and mountains you have to cross. So they gave us this van, and we thought it was all right. But when we drove off, 6 of us were able to sit in the van, and it moved off on the flats from the airport, and that was fine. But later on, you'll hear our story. So we took off from the airport, and we went up into Cherry Gardens, and we had refreshed, slept, well, and then we got up the next morning, and we packed our bags, and we took off. And the first place we're trying to do, the instruction that we were given, is that you need to drive to Mavis Bank. And Mavis Bank is up in the St. Andrew area. So this is the path. You'll go up through Hope Road towards Papine, where on the left of Papine is the UTEC University, and on the right is the university. Down in the valley is the University of the West Indies, and also the university, the hospital. But when you reach Papine now, you cross into the road. You cross the fording and the Papine Valley flood area. Well, not even a flood area. It's just a drainage or something like that. But it's where whenever it floods, there's the river, the water comes down, and we start to drive, and we gradually climb up the mountain, and we bypass and we climb up the mountain towards and we are going to Mavis Bank. And the van was able to pick its way up the bank, up that slope, and we managed to reach Mavis Bank. We were instructed to park our van near the police station because they are friends of the Whitfield Hall people, and then we parked it there, and lo and behold, sooner or later, our driver with his van came and was ready to pick us. We loaded into the van, and then we took off. Now, so from Mavis Bank, it's unusual. Mavis Bank seems to be on a level after you climb the mountain, but it's as soon as you leave Mavis Bank town, you seem to be going down the hill towards the valley, and at the bottom of the valley, you wind your way down into to the valley where there is the Yallas River. The upper streams of the Yallas River is right there. And we crossed the river on the narrow bridge, and we looked to the right and the left, and we saw the little stream, the little trickle at that point. Well, it's more than a trickle, but we gradually, carefully crossed that rickety concrete bridge, and we went across. As soon as you cross Yallas River, this is a valley now, and you drive for a little while in that valley, and you can see the expanse of whether agriculture or industry and all that. And then you look ahead, and we start to wind our way up the hill. And we wind our way up the hill up to Hagley Gap. And at Hagley Gap now, it seems like the mountain is start to expose itself dramatically. if at certain point you can turn right, and that will take you back to St. Thomas, down to the um, um, into to St. Thomas Bay. And then if you turn slightly um, west, north, and then east, you're going up through Ugly Cap, and the steep incline. And then we notice the guy we're saying, we looked at the steep incline, and for suddenly the guy stopped his van, and he went down, and I don't know what he was doing, but when I looked, I saw he went. I said, I wondered how this van is gonna climb this mountain. And he stopped. And then I saw he pushed his hand down deep into the front of the vehicle, almost like he's going down into the engine. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, look, I have a four-wheel gear changer down here. And he had converted the van and attached a four-wheel drive, let's call it a gear system to his van. And when he pushed that in, you hear the gear grind into position, or ground into position with that. And then he started to wind his way up the mountain towards Whitfield Hall. And our mouth was in our mouth, or I don't know, our hearts were in our mouth, because the climbing up the Blue Mountains now, this is just slopes, and you wonder if the van is gonna fall over to the right over the precipice. And at certain times the road is so rough, then you wonder if he's gonna get over this pothole, and then the van just climbed up over the embankment and down into the pothole, and we rocked down in the pothole, and then it climbed back up started to climb the hill. And that we struggled, and we rocked and we rolled and we climbed for about 30 minutes, and then when we suddenly reached something, what of a plateau. And then we drove along the plateau towards the Blue Mountains. And then we looked ahead of us, and we saw the fields to the left and to the right and the bottom. We saw the onions and the scallion gardens. The fields of scallion and onions are planted up in the mountain. The farmers are there. This is a different experience from the first climb. And as soon as, before we reach Whitfield Hall, it says over there is the camp. And we drove over, and we reached the yard. One of the first things we saw was the cabin in its rustic form, sitting on the edge of the mountain, of the flat plateau. And when we looked to the back of the cabin, it's the tall, majestic eucalyptus trees. Eucalyptus trees are the trees that are growing maybe California and Australia, but somehow the Whitfield Hall plantation people had planted these maybe 100 or so years ago, and they're majestic. And now the wind is coming up from the valley, and it just whistled. It made the leaves of the eucalyptus trees, they whistle as it passes through the trees. And then Whitfield Hall is also a plantation of coffee. And so we walked around the plantation, and when we looked at the coffee, the luscious beauty of the cherry-like red berries are just glistened with a shiny surface and luscious. They look like you could eat them as grape. And that's the Blue Mountain coffee, the raw state of the Blue Mountain coffee. It looks like dark grapes, luscious and big, green and red, and some green because those are the green ones. So that's the feel. So I went inside, and there we have the cabin. He has the cabins and a series, and the river room has a series of bunk beds, man. And one room can probably sleep about 6 people, if I remember right. And so we chose our cabin and our bunks, and we spread our towels over those mattresses. And then in the kitchen, the guys, this is now evening, and the guys start to cook. And one of the things that they did for us was to cook a good bowl, big pot of soup, chicken noodle soup. And we had that soup. I think it was chicken noodle, but it was soup, chicken soup. And with dumplings and yams. And we had our fill in the night, in the dark of night. Remember, we don't have any light as such, no electricity up in the mountains. So we had carried a couple of flashlights, and then he had lamps. And so, but the dinner was served. Then what they had was maybe 100-year-old fireplace, and they was gracious to us, and they lit that fireplace, and as the heat from the fire, and the wood was crackling and burning, and the heat from the fire came into the dining room, in the elongated table, as a group of us, I think it was 6 of us or so, gathered and ate in the soup. So here we are with the heat of the fireplace and the coldness of the Blue Mountain coming down and coming through the window panes. And we were warm in the stomach and warm in the body because of the fireplace and the soup. And so after that, we settled down, cleaned up, and we settled down. And we had a short meeting because they told us that the next is go and get some sleep. Because although it's 9 o'clock now, it was about 9 o'clock that evening or night. You better get some sleep, because all of you will be knocking on your door at 1 o'clock or 12, maybe 12:30 in the morning. And all of us, you have to be awake and ready. By 1 o'clock, the march starts. And so, some of us, we try to get some sleep. But the excitement is in our body. And so, we can't sleep that much. But somehow, we must have slept off. And by sometime 12 something or 12:15, I heard footsteps. And by 12:30, I heard the knocking and the call out, "Wake up, wake up." And so we got up and we put on our socks and we put on our warm clothes, and we packed our bag with a few snacks, crackers and candies and sugar. Some of us carried some sugar candies and all that. Others of us carried water and dry food, crackers or biscuits and all that. And we packed our bags. And we took our flashlight and we gathered outside the Whitfield Hall cabin hut. And the march started. We marched further along the plateau towards the east. And then at certain parts, we started somewhat north up the mountain, and it's foot by foot, and then you hear the Blue Mountain at this moment coming off the Blue Mountain. It's the wind, and the chilliness start to get into your body already. But at this point, we still can withstand the cold. And as we walked, the leader, at certain parts, I think it was maybe about an hour or so, or hour and a half, he says, we are now in starting Jacob's ladder. And Jacob's ladder is a steep incline. It's one of the steepest incline to get our way to the Blue Mountain Peak. And we started step by step. And with the flashlight, it's dark in the morning, so we had to keep the flashlight on her towards the ground on our feet so that we don't bump into each other. But we know that somebody is ahead of us. But it's a string of people, and we are winding our way up the mountain. And believe me or not, folks, Jacob's ladder is not easy, because as you climb, you wind your way left, you wind your way right, and you're zigzagging your way up this step, and you're stepping and you're stepping. It's like really a ladder, and you're climbing. And believe it or not, the strain was on the body. And if the young person sees this, don't forgive me, because one member of the party, he got sick, and the stress and strain on the body, he started to throw up. And so we had to stop and figure out if he can go any further. And we gave him some water, and we found out that he was eating his sugary candy, maybe too early. And so with the water, we rested and waited for him. And so he said he feel like he can go. So we gradually now, with careful steps, gradually step, and we climbed. And when we finally reach a point, the leader says, you have now finished Jacob's ladder. Are you all right? You guys are still alive? I said, yes. And after Jacob's ladder, then it starts to get a little easier, because at this point, between Jacob's ladder and before we hit the other peak, the other steep climb, there's a slightly, not plateau, but you're going across a contour that is somewhat lateral and gently on the foot. But in the path, the left and the right and above us are the trees and the fern, and the mist of the Blue Mountains start to overcome us. And the wind brought in, and the wind just brought the mist into the clothes and start to soak the clothes. And by the time we finished that stretch of that thing, we were somewhat wet. Most of the outer parts of the clothes were wet, and we start to feel the coldness of the Blue Mountain. And we're wondering where we are, because it's somewhat dark. And we climbed and we climbed, and eventually at 6 something in the morning, we burst out into some slight opening, and then we looked ahead and we saw the steep incline. And this now was no ladder, but a bumpy climb through the rocks and the cavities of the incline. And some places, I don't know if it's rangers or so, they have put logs across the little path so that it can build steps at the most difficult section. And as we reach a section, we look back, and then you could see the whole of Jamaica and the whole of the valley overlooking Kingston and St. Thomas. And you look down, and you could barely see the lights, the twinkling lights like penny of Kingston far off in the distance. But now I'm not even sure where we are if it was about 4,000 feet up, but we were way up there. And now the beauty of Jamaica start. You wonder if you're in Scotland or you're in Wales or you're in another country. This could not be Jamaica, because the wind and the cold start to hit your body. And our leader, he must have been a little bit anxious to get going, because he does this excursion maybe once in a while, or not once in a while, very often with other groups. And so he's flying up the mountain because he's accustomed to this. And here we are dragging back. And surprisingly, the youngest of us was climbing like a tractor, no problem. But at the same time, our legs and knees start to ache. And for the next, for the next hour or so, we hit another steep incline. But this time you're enclosed in among the trees and the ferns. And all you have to do is just keep on going, because you can't look to the left, and you can look to the left and the right, but you can't see anything much more than shrubberies. And you wind your way, and you have to trust your lead and trust that you're going up, and your body start to ache. And believe it or not, by 7 o'clock that morning, we saw the sign that says, "Welcome to Blue Mountain Peak." And we were elated, but our body was exhausted. And up by the Blue Mountain Peak, we looked, because I remember I started to tell people now about the cabin, the little house that was up there. And poor thing, sadly, the house was smashed down and there was none there. And then but the rangers or the authorities, they did a good job. They had the plaque where they show that you're at the Blue Mountain Peak. It gave the elevation that you're 7,000 such and such feet above sea level. And then we rushed out to another section of the plateau to see if we could see over the hill, over the valleys of Jamaica. And we were disappointed, because on this climb, the clouds came over the mountain, and we were enclosed in a thick cloud, and we could not see further than maybe a mile. And that was a disappointment, because when you go to the Blue Mountain, one of the greatest things is to see the rising of the sun, to see the sun rays from the east. And if you can have a clear day, as I said before, you can see maybe out to the remnants shores of Cuba. But this time, that wasn't to take place. And so we walked around the peak of Blue Mountain, and you think, as I said, you're in another country. And the cold hit Shippy the Explorer's body, and the shiver went under the clothes. By now we are almost wet. And somehow Shippy the Explorer, Mrs. Explorer, was elated because she likes the cold, and she was saying, this is great. This is great. It feels so good. As the wind whipped across her face and body, she held out her hands and felt like she was in heaven. And some of the rest of us were freezing like hell. And that was the experience. Now we had water and some snacks, and we milled around for a little while. And since there was nothing, we're not going to camp, we started to climb and said bye to Blue Mountains. And now the agony starts, because climbing up the mountain is one experience. But going down, now your muscles are tired and you have to break yourself to go down the mountain step by step, watching for the tripping precipice, the tripping potholes, and looking for the logs and all the step over. And as you go down, the pain in between the top of the knee, right above the knee, and the back of the kind of calf, but actually the calf was aching. And then above the knee, you're using your knees now as brake, and you're coming down, and you're exhausted. And believe it or not, as we make our way down, we go a mile or so, or we come down 1,000 feet or so, we have to stop and rest. And coming down the mountain, I reminiscing about the whole days when I went up there and I had looked for strawberries. And I found a little few strawberries. They're small and petite, almost like just a dot. And you look to the left, and you remember the stories of wild boar, and we didn't see any, but we see how they were plowing and searching for worms up in the mountains. And so we gradually come down the mountain, and at certain areas we stop again and we rested. And by the time we reach a point where we looked over an incline and we saw Whitfield Hall encampment way down, maybe about straight down it looks like about a mile. But remember, we have to be zigzagging ourselves across the mountain to reach down there. And our body is so exhausted. At that moment of seeing Whitfield Hall, we feel like we could just throw ourselves over and roll down to the encampment. Or if we can fly, we just fly down because we were so exhausted. And remember, we stopped again and we rested. And at this point now, we were back into the coffee zone, and by observing the coffee plants and the berries, and we looked around and we saw other plants that are being planted up there, and we saw something like raspberry and all sorts of things, but we were afraid to eat that because I wasn't sure if that was edible. And so we wound our way back down, and when we reached the flat towards Whitfield Hall in cabins, we're not on top of the world. We were in total agony, and now we are just dragging ourselves a foot there and a foot there, and we gradually step towards the cabin. And when we reach the cabin, we're so exhausted, we said, and wet, we wanted to bathe. And now the place is still cold at this area, but we did not care. We went into the individual bathrooms, and we gathered cold water, because since we are so exhausted and somewhat the muscles are tight, maybe we don't care. Cold water. We did not have time to warm the water so we can take a shower. So we just bathe in the cold, icy mountain water. And how you do this, and how you bathe in cold water. You wet the rag and you soap it up, and you start to soak the body with the rag, the cold rag. And as the soap goes around the body and all that, it kind of get yourself climatized to the coldness. And you take a little water and flash it, and you cry out, you shout out. And then that gives you enough time to finish soaping up. And then you gradually muscle yourself up and take and confront the cold water to wash off the soap. And so if you have to scream, you scream. But that's cold shower in the mountains of Blue Mountain, in the mountains of the Blue Mountains. And so we showered and we dressed ourselves and we came back and we had lunch. The one thing we was surprised about is Whitfield Hall, if they see this tape years after, you're in the middle of coffee farm. And I would say one of the adjustments they should be doing, if they're still running, they should be having the coffee pot going, folks, because here you are up in the cold mountain and you want to have a cup of coffee ever so often. It's a hot cup of coffee. But by the after we bathed and we had lunch, somewhat lunch, we started a drive off. Got back into the van, and the guy took us back down to Mavis Bank. And at Mavis Bank, we jumped into our little van that we had rented, and we had said we had decided not to go back down towards Papine, but we are going to adventure. We're going to explore. Back those days, Shippy was an explorer already. Weren't taping anything. We were just driving. And we drove along the mountainside, and there's a road that takes you from Mavis Bank up the mountain again and down into the Buff Bay Valley. And when we reach a certain part, I think it was section. I remember the word section. Believe it or not, we put the van in first gear. And we are trying to climb. Section is almost climbing a straight tree. And the van would not climb the hill. And I started worrying. And we started to drive, reach section. And the van would never go up the hill. We tried to gear up. It just looked like it wanted to go back down. This incline was so steep. I had to stop the van and tell people to get out. And everybody got out of the van and started to push. I said, push. And I put the van in first gear and they pushed. And so we're able to climb the hill up to section. And when we reached section, the whole of Jamaica was in full view, because it's a plateau, and the coffee is all around us. And then you looked and you can see the valleys of Portland. And so we start to, after section now, you're starting to go back downhill, and you're traveling through, you're winding your way down the hill. And you're looking to the right, and the precipice is there, and you have to gradually pass those precipices. And the road is so narrow that on both left and right, the grass is just scratching the side and dragging across the side of the van. And you wonder, where are we going? Where am I taking my friends and my family through this wilderness? But we gradually make our way down the valley, and we reach a place called Cedar Valley. And then from Cedar Valley, we kept on driving, and now the road is a little bit better, and we've reached the place, and we reach Belcaris and Rosehill, and then we were in the valley, on the flat now, and we reach. But just before we reached the valley, we saw a number of guys coming up the mountain on vehicles with their bikes on top of it. and we were wondering what they were doing. And we were told that they would be driven up to the top of the mountain, maybe up to Cedar Valley or further up, and then they would ride down like crazy down the mountain, down to the valley, flats. But after Cedar Valley, we go through Belcaris and all sorts of things and Rose Hill, then you're on the flat towards Charlestown. And we stopped at Charlestown, and this is where the Maroons are. And we toured the Maroon, the Maroon Museum, and we got a tour and instruction and all sorts of things. And then we were taken down to the river. I think it was the Buff Bay River to the adjoining the property of Charlestown. And since Shippy is also a genealogist and interested in the families who came out of Charlestown region, actually we came out of Rose Hill. Our first plantation in Jamaica is one of the first plantations was at Rose Hill. That's the Giscombe plantation, and you see the Giscombe sign here. And so Charlestown were introduced to the story of the Maroons and how they fought the war and bet and won the battle between the British and themselves, and how they split, and one contingent of them was taken to Scots Hall. And so the young lady, one of the leaders there, they said to sit down because the entertainment starts. And they started to beat the conga drums, and they started to dance, and they encouraged us to dance. And believe it or not, if you listen to the conga drums and the drums of Africa, you're gonna be spiritually pulled in. And so we did. We were pulled into the dance, and it's like a spirit was overcoming a few of our bodies and our minds. And so the spirit of Africa revigorated our body and let us climb to another element in our thinking. And so we danced and we twirled and jumped. And as the music subsided, we came down off our musical high. And so that was the experience of Charlestown. And that we drove through Buff Bay. We left Charlestown and went through Buff Bay, and we head on home. And that was the second experience of climbing Blue Mountain, the experience of going to Jamaica and making those trips are inspirational, they're spiritual, and they are physical, and they reset your mind and thinking about the world and people, places and things. And so I'm saying, if you are able and you're fit and in certain sense fit, because you don't want to climb Blue Mountain when you're not able. You can't do it. You have to be fit. You have to be able to walk, not with a stick. So I encourage you to go on adventure, find out, maybe you have to explore and search for these various groups that are taking excursion to the Blue Mountains. I don't encourage you to go by yourselves or do it by yourselves, because it's not an easy ordeal. So I encourage you, Shippy the Explorer is saying, we did it, we survived with the aches and pains at the end. But you can see, even after years of going through that experience, I can still recall some of that adventure. And so I wish I could do it again, but I'm not going to do it again. I'll just do it in my mind and tell you the story. So, if you like this type of story, you can share it so that others may take the chance of venturing out and go to Jamaica and climb the Blue Mountain and experience once in a lifetime phenomenon. Thanks for listening to this story. Thanks for bearing with me. Now, since I've taken you that ordeal, you can now relax, because I know your muscles, you were tense because you were just listening. So now relax, get a cup of tea or the Blue Mountain coffee if you have it, and just reminiscent about and contemplate about climbing if you can. As I said, thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for subscribing. Shippy the Explorer saying, bye for now. Walk good. Climb carefully. Well, rest for a long time. Take care of yourself and others. Bye for now. Thanks for watching.